Hello, good Sunday morning. So I haven't been able to stream for a few days. It's just been focusing on work, or haven't found a window during work to do the streaming. And I was alone with the tiny one from Friday to Saturday, so that doesn't give much room for streaming. But I've been reflecting. What I've been reflecting on is, let's see, the mental model. It's very interesting. When we've been refactoring this app now, we've been thinking about looking at the Family Scrum app and literally reflecting the UI into the state tree. Kind of like what the documentation also reflects, is what state is behind this UI. And that makes a lot of sense. But there is this ongoing discussion of, even here, ongoing discussion of what is actual component state and what is actual application state. So what I mean, the perfect example of that is this input. Is that input actual application state? So would you actually put new to-do title in your state tree, or would you put it in the component? And the benefit of putting it into the component is that new to-do title might change depending on the state of something you actually do inside your state tree. For example, if you're adding a to-do asynchronously, you might want to delete new to-do title, or sorry, not delete it, but empty it after it asynchronously added a to-do, or keep it there if the adding of the to-do failed. But at the same time, it's also dictating a lot about how the UI is implemented. Maybe the new to-do title isn't an input at all. Maybe it's like an LLM, for example, that's just suggesting new to-dos to do. So I've been reflecting on what is this boundary of what is naturally part of your state tree and what is arguably part of your state tree. And I'm trying to find a rule of thumb. And what I want to do is I want to look at this and I want to argue that certain state here doesn't belong here. So new to-do title doesn't belong here because that's dictating how the UI is implemented. But anything else here is really okay. And we're going to put this mindset into the current refactor, because currently we are looking at this piece of UI and we're kind of building up all the state management to build this specific UI. But I want to change the mindset. So we're not trying to reflect the UI. We are just giving the functionality necessary to manipulate the actual application state. And even in this family app, we have this tree, this view thing. And even that is also dictating how, what's the rule of thumb here? If you're putting state that dictates how the UI is implemented, that's wrong. That's what I'm trying to, this is what I'm experimenting and reflecting on. So with that mindset, we would have to say that this view state, this isn't the responsibility of your application state. Because it's dictating how the UI is implemented. And the same goes for this checklists thing. It's just dictating how the UI is implemented. But the consumption of the data and manipulating the data is not dictating how the UI is implemented. So what I'm kind of getting at is, when as a team you look at a mock, even though the UX engineer literally wants to make that a reality, like the like state management engineer or the person responsible for like getting the data to the UI and all of that isn't concerned about the specifics of the UI. It's more like, it's like sending a REST API. A REST API doesn't care about how the data is presented, but it does care about how it delivers that data based on how it's intended to be presented. Yeah, that's a good one. Because very often, that's where you collaborate. Like, you don't tell the backend team to like just provide the data. You kind of tell them about the specific needs, like how are we going to use these pieces of data together? What do we need to subscribe to and keep up to date? And how often are we going to change the data, and so on and so on? And that's based on the actual consumption of the data. So it's the same for state management. You don't want to dictate the specifics of the UI, but you want to provide something that makes sense for the specific UI. And that is what makes it so blurry, I think. Okay, so we have dashboard. So what we're gonna do here, I'm gonna do a different approach. Instead of having like groceries as reflecting the groceries view, I'm gonna have groceries as this is the state management for groceries, in the sense that it's basically gonna be the same thing. We have add grocery. Yeah, we're protecting the state. We're saying shop. Because again, like if I were to expose the specific data in the components, you would do something like delete grocery, which doesn't make any sense because you can't delete groceries. That's not possible, but you can buy them or shop them, as I say here. And that happens to be like a delete operation under the hood. But from the perspective of the actual application, it's not deleting, it's actually buying the grocery. And then we have, yeah, so what I'm thinking is we have family. So we're not going to have, I'm actually going to remove the views, and we're going to solve that. I might just put it into a component as like its own thing, or maybe we'll just introduce a router. What should we do first? Should I just remove it? What do I want to do? Okay, we're going to move it so we don't have to like learn about something new. I'm just going to move that into components, and we're going to have inside family scrum, we're going to have views. And I'm wondering how I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to just provide it on a context so that you can navigate the views wherever you are. Yeah, let's call it views context. And then we're going to move that over. And I'm doing this because I just happen to have my own implementation of views, but this might as well be like a router or something. So let's this is going to be part of the thingy. Let's remove that. Then we have view states, and I'm going to actually make them reactive here as well, but I'm just not making it part of my state tree. So we have back here. Oh, did I have? Oh, back isn't a thing. Cool. Okay, so let's see how we would actually implement this. So this would be view, views context, create context from React. This is going to be view. And then this is so annoying. Null as view. Oh yeah, as a known as view. Like this is the most shitty part. Most shitty part about context. Use views. Use views. Let's see. So this will be the getter. Oh, come on. Cons views use state. Sorry, use context. Use context, and then we're gonna return. I'll have to excuse the weird code in between here. And then we wouldn't have the actual views provider. Export columns, views provider. Look at that. Or maybe we should call it like create views provider. And that's gonna be return. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're gonna do create views provider, because it's gonna create the actual view state here. And this is the point of this thing is that it actually keeps yeah, so what's interesting about this is like keeping the state of UI when the UI is not active. And typically it's not about keeping the state of the UI, it's keeping the state of the data. So that doesn't change anything here. But you could argue that when you navigate from one page to you navigate to a page and you click a specific tab, right? And then you want to kind of navigate to a different page, and when you go back, that tab should still be active. But that can be argued to be, that's a navigation state. A navigation state is part of the router. So it's like you have these different types of like state. You have like, I guess you could call it like, I wouldn't call it data state. It's more like, I want to call it application state. Yeah, I'm trying to think of more examples. Yeah, maybe let's just continue. And then, so we don't actually have view states here. We actually only have it's dashboard or, oh, dashboard, groceries. Because we don't actually have, like, what's the current view? That's the only thing we care about. And then we actually just need a view stack. That's the thing. Oh, so this is not just view. Sorry, let's see. We have a view stack. So this will be a dashboard. And then we have this back thing. So the actual, let's call it export type views. And that would be like current would be view. And then, oops, sorry. And then we have back. And of course, you're able to navigate to something. But we can add that later. That will be like open. Yeah, by the way, these are going to be... Sorry. Because these takes arguments. So that's the current view. And then we have... Yeah, we could call it pop and push. Yeah, let's just do that for now. Cool. And this is actually gonna return name dashboard, create views provider. So what we're gonna return here is, and this needs to be TSX, return views context provider, and the value here would be the actual what do we call it? Views. Oh, sorry. And here we will get children react node. And then const views would be get current. Yes. Use views. Yeah, would just be return. Yeah, and then if no views, throw the error. Cannot use views. Cool. So again, like I wanted to have my custom navigation, but I'm considering that UI implementation, which it really is. It's very interesting because you can also at the same time argue that no, the application state should be responsible for like how you navigate the app. But what I'm kind of trying to conclude here is that it's going to be a better separation of concerns and it's going to be cleaner code. And we're going to see that hopefully. But I really want to find a way to communicate like very clearly if this is like the pattern to kind of highlight, how do you actually identify application state versus UI state? And I think it's too ambiguous to say UI state. Or maybe some people derive that as the exact thing I'm trying to communicate. Like UI state is state that dictates how the UI is going to look like, or how the interaction is going to be performed from the user. That's like UI state. But I think other people thinks of it more as, or yeah, maybe that is what people mean. But to me, at least, it hasn't been that clear what the UI state is. And it can't be for other people either, because it's such a common thing. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, so let's remove this stuff. So we're actually not gonna have dashboard. And we're gonna change, so this is data, but what we're gonna do instead is that we're actually gonna have groceries here. But those groceries are gonna be, let's see. I can't remember what it needed. Oh, what was it? What did you need? Context, data, family. Oh, what was the last thing? Family Scrum. Oh yeah. So we're gonna say get groceries There we go. So what we're rather going to do is that we're going to keep our data behind the scenes, right? Because data for us just represents a reactive way to change. It represents the reactive data, really. And then we're going to abstract that so you can't change it directly, but you rather have to use specific methods to change it. But this is not about like how the UI interacts with that data. It's just generically how can you interact with that data. So we're gonna call this grocery state instead. So the only thing we can see here is that this is how you can interact with groceries in this app. You can, yeah, we're gonna remove this awake thing. That is something else. That's like specific to this UI. It's like keeping it alive. We're not gonna have input. And we're gonna have, yeah, that's fine. Groceries. So you can add a grocery, we allow that. And then, let's see, awake. Wait, what's this? Oh yeah, add grocery. We're not gonna do this. Oh, this one's interesting though. Yeah, so this is exactly where it breaks down. Because we oh, this is so interesting. And why it's so difficult to create a rule of thumb. Because if this input was just adding a grocery, then you could dictate it as UI state. But this input isn't just adding a new grocery, it's also a filter, right? But then you can also say like, okay, I happen to use an input for this UI, and whenever I change it, I'm gonna update the filter value in the application state at the same time as keeping my own state of that input so that I can add a grocery. Like that's kind of how you have to think about it in this model. So instead of calling it like input, we're gonna call it filter. Because some UI might differentiate them, right? One input to add and another input to actually filter. It's very interesting. Let's see. So this will be filter. Let's rename this to filter. Cool. Oh. Yeah, filter. Cool. Should we call it current groceries? Or we should really call them filter groceries. Because that's what they are. Cool. Okay, and then we're actually not gonna have this checklist item stuff. This is also like from an application state perspective, you just have to-dos that might have a checklist. So if you choose to implement a specific view for to-dos that just has a checklist, then Then you would do that as part of your UI state or building up the UI. But what we want to do, we want to actually protect the to-dos just like we protect the groceries. So what we would rather do is say to-dos, and then we would say create to-dos. And this would take, I guess, the same. Let's do type params context. It would take data state, or they would just call it data. No, data state. Params. Cool. And then I guess it also needs to have family scrum state. Yeah, so let's data family scrum. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to wrap again around the to-do. So we're going to name it something like to-do state. And like, what can you do with a to-do? You can archive it. You cannot toggle it. It has a title. It has completed. Let's see, what does it actually have? Oh, it has a description. And you might have a date, time, checklist. I don't think a to-do currently is bound to a grocery. That was a concept I was exploring previously. Archive. Checklist. I think this is DTO. Do I actually have? Yeah, checklist item, sorry. Yes, so it might have either of these things where I'm gonna say type checklist item state. So a checklist item has a title, completed, and then you can, like, the only thing you're allowed to do with a checklist item is to toggle it and remove it. The problem is this union we have, which is very annoying. Yeah, but we're going to change that. So we're going to give it, what was it? Was it actual title? Yeah. So we're going to give it type checklist item completed. So that would mean it's completed true and it has a user ID, or a checklist item not completed, I guess. Not completed, completed false. And then we're gonna, instead of doing this, we're gonna say state is checklist item completed or checklist item not completed. And the only reason I do this is because it's a union. So I want to explicitly handle this. And notice I'm not using an explicit state here. I could say like current completed here, but it's actually not necessary because we have this is controlling it, completed true or completed false. So only when completed true, you actually have a completed by user ID here. Yeah, so this is checklist item state. This is how I want you to interact with it. Regardless of the UI, this is how you can interact with it. And here I could even like remove checklist so that you kind of always have a checklist there, but you need to be able to check if it actually has a checklist. So Let's keep that there. And this is what we're gonna, this is how we're gonna protect it. So do we have, so you can also add a to-do, right? So we're gonna have type to-do state, which would be to-dos. And it will be add to-do. And here you can add like different things. By the way, what did I do for groceries in terms of removing it? Yeah, shop, of course. Yeah. So you can add a to-do. We'll have to investigate that later. But basically now, this is how you do it. And yeah, let's do this for now. So what we want to do is state, to-do state, and to-dos would be data, to-dos, map, create to-do. Yeah, and then add to-do. Let's just make that empty. And then function create to-do. Yeah, you're actually going to get a to-do here, Mr. And we're going to allow you to look at the title, description. Description. Did I call it something else? I think I did. It's going to be a description. Oh, and it doesn't have a completed, does it? So we're going to allow you to get the date, but you need to get it from the actual to-do data. Date, and the same goes for time. So the whole point there is that we're controlling, and then get checklist. We're controlling how you can actually interact with the data. So this will be checklist item data. Oh, interesting. Oh, look at this. A little bit. Oh, yeah, it's the. Yeah. Yeah, this definitely makes more sense to me than what we did previously. Let's see, we're gonna do add to do later. We have create to do, which is archive. And this is a so nice thing now, so I could just point to context dot persistent to do's. Oh, what did I call it? Oh yeah, I forgot about it's family persistence I want. I can now just point to this stuff. So family persistence to do's. And we're still protecting it behind create to do, so it can only archive that specific one. And then let's see, for toggle. Yeah, so this one's a little bit more tricky because this has this way of updating, which is kind of annoying, but that's how I structure the data. So let's just copy this. But again, that's why you want to kind of just protect it. Yeah, so this one should really be inside this one. To do data. Oh yeah, So this will be index. Oh yeah, interesting. Yeah, this is interesting because here we don't really know that the to-do data has a checklist. But you can create a checklist item without a checklist. It's interesting. Yeah, I'm just going to do this for now because I actually know that it's cool. But this is how you can interact with the to-dos in this application. Like I haven't implemented adding one, but this is how you can interact with it. And the only thing we're doing is just controlling how you change the data, which is definitely the responsibility of your application state. It's like the backend of your UI, right? Oh, maybe that's how it should be communicated, like the backend of your UI, because it's such a great analogy to the actual backend. Like the backend does not dictate how your UI doesn't care about the specific UI implementation. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't care about the UI implementation. It cares about how the data is consumed, just like your state management cares about how your state is consumed. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so now we have that. We can delete checklists. Not using context here. Maybe I don't need it. Oh yeah, and then we have const to do's equals create to do's. And that would be get to do's. And to do's here would be to do state. Oh, didn't I export it? And then we're gonna do the same for dinners and week. But that's basically it. That's the only thing that our application state is doing. It's taking in the data, making it reactive, subscribing to it, keeping it up to date, and then exposes like an interface for any UI to implement to use the data in the expected way. And then you can argue like, why even do that, right? Why not just consume the data? And you could do that, but then your components would have a lot of like data related terminology. It will be more verbose. just wouldn't be as clean. Just like, what if your backend didn't do the database queries for you behind the REST endpoints? What if you had to do that in the client? It will be very verbose, right? But I am still reflecting on, like, one thing is data, another thing is like UI complexity. What is UI complexity? So we can, yeah, no, I don't have the old UI, but it's very interesting. Like the old Code Sandbox UI, like the new one is just VS Code. But the old one had so much complexity to it. Like you would have the live feature, for example, but that's like data. You had like Git commits and stuff, but that's also kind of data. It's a different kind of, like, it's not just a pure database thing. You have something like inviting users, right? Yeah, but I think that's it. Like like the reason I'm talking about this, I'm trying to find a way to explain this middle, like, why isn't your REST endpoint consumed directly in your components? Why do you need this in between layer? And it has to do with the complexity between consuming something from a server and consuming it in a component. That's really what I'm talking about, because some applications doesn't have any complexity there. Like if you're using like e-commerce is very much like you're consuming what your server provides, right? But then there are other types of applications like Code Sandbox, where the only place you really just consume what the data gives you is the actual sandbox data. But then you have all these complex flows like live collaboration, you have Git management, you're deploying to Vercel, you have invitation management, data management, dependency management. Like there's so many things that's tied to like some asynchronous external source. And if you were to implement all of that in your components, it will get really, really messy. And that kind of like layer, you want that to be as global as possible. Or it can be global, because it's kind of like your data, right? Nobody says like, if you synchronize like a list of to-dos with a component, those to-dos should just be for that component. Like React Query and anything else doing data management, that's like global. Like it's a global cache, they call it. But then there are other kinds of, it's not just consuming like a REST endpoint or a GraphQL endpoint. Yeah, and you have like REST endpoints that's like process management views, where you have alarms and like all these kinds of things where you want to, and you're subscribing to data updates. And yeah, there's so much stuff that goes beyond just synchronizing a shopping list. Yeah, I think that's really what I'm trying to convey when I say UI complexity. Yeah. Okay, but this has been like, I don't know about you, but this has been very helpful for me. But I guess for this like family Scrum application, I don't really need this layer. I just need my data to be reactive. All the complexity I've handled here is inside this Firebase implementation. Like it's just hiding all the complexity of the collections and everything. And I just want to keep that data like global and reactive. So I could even have like put the reactiveness inside this abstraction. Which is also interesting. Like Bonsify isn't like it's just that single reactive primitive, right? So it just changes where you can use it. So I could just have my own little reactive context in React. That would be enough. But again, like you have the groceries, it has a lot of complexity too. Like just this filter thing is very complex. But the to-dos, they aren't very complex, right? But they have complex like updates because of Firebase. But again, like where does that where's that interface? Does that interface belong? I could implement this in my Firebase thing. So you didn't have this like update. I would have like the specific things you could do with those, like with the different entities. That would be just fine. But I wouldn't call it like, you would rather pass in the ID like this. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. So what we could do here, like I'm kind of trying to remove this layer. The only thing that this really does now is it's handling the session. And then it creates the family persistence, right? So you have the session and you have the family persistence, but that family persistence could have all these specific methods for changing the data. So there isn't like generic set update blah blah blah. It's actually like toggle whatever. Yeah, it's very interesting. I need to reflect more on this, but I really like this idea of there's something between your backend and your components. That's the differentiator of applications. It's how much needs to be inside that middle layer. Some applications can just consume their backend directly in components. That's fine, even though it adds like some terminology and some fluff to your components. Typically, it's fine. Yeah. Okay, what was I thinking about? I was thinking about, I can't remember. I wonder if I'm more in like a writing mood. I want to summarize all of this. Or maybe I want to actually... Yeah, it's very interesting. Why not just put it behind, like, it's almost like I could, yeah, so what I'm saying is that I could just provide this context. Like there's one context, and I could put the reactiveness inside here. I could still like call it persistence, right, instead of Firebase. Or yeah, not that it's super important. But then that kind of becomes... But I would still want to have, like, it starts with a session, and I need to create the family persistence based on the session, right? Yeah, it's very interesting. But I'm not sure how much this abstraction would actually clean up the components. Like, is it worth it? But at the same time, it's such a... You have to put it somewhere, right? So the way this component would work is like, you would just look at the groceries. Instead of add grocery, you would bring in the Firebase context or the persistent context. You would have to create an ID. You would have to do all this, right? But then you can argue maybe add groceries should actually be on the groceries collection exposed by family persistence. I think something is happening. Okay, but I'm gonna let this be and reflect on it, and then it seems my time is out. So bye for now.